Hey, it's Jordan with Laundromat Resource, and I want to tell you this is the year for you to buy that laundromat finally. I hear all the time people say to me, I've been thinking about buying a laundromat for years, or I thought about it a decade ago and I never did it. Don't be that person, or if you are that person, this is the year to actually take the action you need to take to buy that laundromat. So I want to tell you why I think you should do that this year, and I want to tell you 10,000 foot overview of how you can actually do that. So if your goal is to leave your 9-to-5 or, financial freedom is the goal, or just increasing your cash flow, listen, in my opinion, there's not really many better ways than a laundromat to do that. And I want to do I'm going to acknowledge it. It's a surface level comparison, but I think it's going to drive home the point. So let's say you've got some money and you throw it in the stock market. On average, we hear around a 10% return on your money on the stock market. Not bad, fairly passive, but obviously we've got ups, we've got downs, we've got all arounds, and it doesn't always play out the way that average of 10% per year promises or makes us believe it's going to play out. But we'll just say, hey, 10% a year, pretty good. Real estate investing, huge fan of real estate investing over here. That can be a really great investment. Let's give real estate the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, we're looking at a 10% year over year cash flow for the real estate, which I think is a little generous in this market, but we're going to give it to it right now. But some additional benefits of real estate is you get that 10% cash flow-ish, but you can also leverage your money in real estate, which is hugely powerful. And one of the big perks of investing in real estate, you also get some tax benefits for rental real estate, and you can build equity in your real estate. So that is all awesome. In my opinion, I prefer real estate over stock market. Maybe the stock market's a little more passive than real estate, but I think real estate is an overall better investment if you buy it right. And there's a learning curve there and all that stuff, but I love real estate. I think it's great. However, if we're talking about financial freedom, if we're talking about leaving your 9-to-5, we're talking about cash flow. And when it comes to cash flow, the average real estate deal cannot touch the average laundromat deal. Here's why. The average laundromat deal is returning a 20 to 25% return on your investment cash flow wise, and that's unleveraged. With laundromats, you can also use leverage, although I will say the leverage you can on average use for real estate is a little bit better than laundromats. So factor that in. You can also get great tax benefits, and you can build equity in laundromats. Although, again, I'll say a little bit better on the equity side for real estate. But we're talking cash flow here because we're talking leaving your 9-to-5 as quickly as possible or achieving financial freedom as quickly as possible. And that is cash flow. And it's tough to beat laundromats when it comes to cash flow. So maybe you're convinced, or maybe you're just intrigued a little bit and you want to hear a little bit more. So that begs the question, how do we actually get ourselves a laundromat? So I want to tell you the 4 numbers you need to get from a laundromat seller to determine the value of the laundromat. All right, so to show you the 4 numbers you need and what you do with these numbers to determine the value of a laundromat, I'm gonna share my screen right here. I'm going to laundromatresource.com here. I'm gonna go to resources, calculators. We have all these different calculators. You could try any of these calculators out for free. I think you get 3 attempts at using them, and the pro community obviously has full access and unlimited access to all the calculators here. So let's go to the analysis calculator. You can go try this out too. This is what it will show you. There's a whole lot of things you can do with this calculator. You can put in business details. At the end of all this, you can download a PDF. I'll show you that. I'm not going to go into a lot of this because I want to show you the numbers, but real quick, I'll just show you. You can add a whole lot of details in here once you get them, but we're not going to do any of that. So let me tell you the 4 numbers you need to determine the value of a laundromat and what to do with them to get to that value. So right here, you have got number 1. We need to know our net operating income. To determine that, we need to know how much money's coming in, and we need to know how much money's going out. I'm going to just make up some numbers here in our fictitious laundromat. We'll call it the Soapy Senorita. And you can see here that our yearly net operating income, which is our income minus expenses before loan payments, of $72,000. This is the cornerstone of the value of the laundromat. It's the first number we need to know. The second number we need to know is how old the equipment is. Now, this first number, we're gonna apply a multiple to it in order to determine the value of the laundromat. The next three numbers will tell us how to determine what that multiple is, okay? So, age of the equipment is the first thing we need to know. Obviously, newer equipment is more valuable than older equipment. So the newer it is, the higher the multiple. And let's say in our example, we've got some 7-year-old equipment. You can see that affected our multiple a little bit. And the next two numbers we need both have to do with the lease. And the first one is the rent amount. So we need to know how much our rent is. So let's say in our example, it's $3,000 a month. Now, is this a good rent amount? Is this a bad rent amount? How do we know? Well, the way we need to look at it is the rent amount as a percentage of the gross income. So you can see that our $3,000 rent is about 20% of our $15,000 estimated income. Obviously, these are a lot of round numbers, but 20%. So is that good? Is that bad? Well, the magic number we're looking for is 25% of the gross income or less for the rent amount. However, this is just our base rent amount. Leases usually, not always, but usually have one of two other expenses. One is the common area maintenance expense. The other one they may have is a triple net expense. Usually it's going to be one or the other. And triple net expense is just that the tenants of a property will pay the expenses for the property in addition to their own expenses, okay? And the three net expenses of the triple net expense is the property maintenance, the property taxes, and the property insurance, okay? So let's say in our example, that comes out to $1,000 a month. So that brings our total rent amount to $4,000, which you can see is above our magic number. So it has affected our multiple a little bit, okay? And then the final number we need here is how many years are left remaining on the lease. I like to give the example of a shoe store. Let's say a landlord says to the shoe store, hey, your lease is up and we're not gonna renew it, sorry. You're gonna have to find another place. Definitely a downer for that shoe store, but they go find another space down the street and rent that space. They get a U-Haul or whatever, load up all their shoe boxes and racks and take them down the street. And within a week or two, they're back up and running. Kind of a bummer, but not that big of a deal. For a laundromat, however, if the landlord says, hey, we're not going to renew your lease, well, guess what? You've got all this plumbing and electrical and infrastructure in place that it's nearly impossible to move it. And usually it's improbable and doesn't really make sense to move that equipment to a new location. So you're kind of out of business. Now, I will say that if you're interested in hearing about a laundromat owner who did do that, check out this podcast episode. I'll put it up here in the, in the video, or I'll put it down in the description. Check out the interview I did with Charles Measley, who actually did move his laundromat. It was very expensive, very costly, but it did make sense in his situation, but rarely does it ever make sense to do that. So if a landlord doesn't renew your lease, you're kind of out of luck almost always. And similarly, let's say a landlord says, okay, your lease is up and we're going to renew your lease, but that $3,000 a month is now $5,000 a month, and your expenses of $9,000 are now $11,000 a month. You can see not only are you losing $2,000 a month of net income, but also your net operating expense has gone from $72,000 down to $48,000, and that's dramatically going to affect the value of our laundromat. So we don't want to run that risk. We want to keep our rent what it is and not have a huge bump all of a sudden. So we want a long lease that gives us some security in the business. 15 plus years is awesome, but if it's lower than that, it starts to affect the value of our business. So you can see here, let's say we've got 13 years on the lease, it affects the value of our multiple here a little bit. And the last variable that you might want to factor in is whether this laundromat is in a large metro area, more of a suburb or a town, or in out in the boondocks somewhere, right? I'm in LA, and so that multiple is going to be affected by that. And you can see it adjusted the multiple a little bit here. So you can see now that based on our net operating income and the three variables that we factored in to determine the multiple, the age of the equipment, the rent amount, and the number of years left on the lease, that gives us a value of $342,000 for this laundromat. It'll also spit out a range for you. And if you want to, you can download a report right here. So you have all that information in one place to keep you organized, or to share that with a partner or maybe a lender. And again, if you went in and put in the information, more detailed information, all that will also be available to you here in the analysis report. So pretty handy dandy little tool you got there. So that's an overview of how to value a laundromat. You now have the tools in your tool belt to get out there and start taking some action. But listen, I'm gonna shoot straight with you. This is a cash business by and large, and it can be difficult to actually verify these numbers. Knowing exactly how much money is coming in, how much is going out, and what the trajectory of that business is so vital to getting it right the first time. And so there's a lot of things you need to know to be able to do this correctly the first time. When I bought my first laundromat about a decade ago, I made huge mistakes because I didn't have any information. I didn't know what I was doing. And it ended up costing me 6 figures. And it's one of the primary reasons that this YouTube channel exists, that laundromatresource.com exists, because I don't want you to make those same mistakes. So make sure you do your research before you buy that first one. And there's tons of free knowledge, free information on laundromatresource.com and other platforms. So make sure you're doing your research before you buy that first laundromat. And if you're ready to get serious about it and you really want to make sure you do it right the first time, check out our course on how to buy your first laundromat in 90 days at laundromatresource.com/buy. This course is not only going to give you everything you need to know to learn how to buy that first laundromat the right way the first time, but it's also going to give you access to all of the tools and resources that you need to make sure that you are getting exactly what you think you're getting when you buy that laundromat. That is the trick here. We want you to have as clear a picture as possible of exactly how that laundromat is performing before you close on the deal. And this course is going to help you get there. So check out again, laundromatresource.com/buy and get that very first laundromat this year. Leave a comment below if I can answer any questions for you and help you get into that first laundromat this year. You can do it, but you've got to take the action on it. I've given you some actions to take today. So get out there and get that first laundromat and take the first big step towards your financial freedom today.